It is season 2. I'm so excited, and welcome back to the Exit Whisperer. I am so excited to be back and to kick things off with the most transparent exited female founder I have ever met in my life. I mean, she makes me look like closed up. It's Sharon Gillenwater, and she rose to fame as a TikTok sensation when she shared the details of her $25 million exit from the company she founded, Boardroom Insiders. No question is ever off the table with Sharon, and she is dedicated to helping founders understand the realities of exiting a business, and in her case, exiting a bootstrap business for 25 million. Can't wait for you to take a listen. Here we go. Welcome, Sharon, to the show.
Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to have you here because I've been following your radically transparent and ultimately so helpful journey on TikTok and Instagram and on LinkedIn and all the channels. And I think you really were the first woman that I saw who spoke openly about her exit. And so I think I want to open by saying thank you for doing that and how much I and so many other founders appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. I talk about things that I didn't know when I was going through the process, and I had to learn along the way. And ultimately what I realized is it wasn't that much over my head as I thought it was going to be. And so I wanted to demystify the process for as many people as possible and hopefully inspire them that this is within the realm of possibility for everyone, regardless of your background or even your experience.
Absolutely. And I think that for many women especially, we start businesses often to build the life we want, right? Like we're sick of corporate or whatever. We build a lifestyle business and it's great. But what you've shown is that you can take that lifestyle business and really turn it into a life-changing asset. And you share exactly how you did it and exactly what that means. And we're just very, very grateful. And so I'd love to hear sort of the start. You actually had a business too. You had one business that you took in funding for and one that you bootstrapped, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So let's start very briefly about the business that you raised funds for, what that experience was like and what sort of happened with that one before we go into the bootstrap piece, because I think there's an important differentiator that you talk about that I want to get into.
Yeah, so that was a content business, essentially email newsletters with an advertising business model. And I started it with family in 1999. It was called fidget.com. And we raised $3 million.
Wow.
In April of 2000, when the crash had already started. It really killed the company because when you raise that amount of money, you're expected to use the money and scale up, and you incur big invoices and long-term contracts and things like that, office space. We did all of that very quickly. And then by November, the incubators take a little over 50%. So they have the majority of board seats. And they pivoted because of the crash. They pivoted from general internet and content companies to biotech. They brought in a new CEO. They had a bunch of ex-Disney people working there who are our contacts, who are content people. And they just decided they didn't want to fully fund us. And since they were handling our finances as an incubator, we had no visibility into whether they had fully funded us or not. And it turned out they didn't. So we were not benefiting from interest off of that $3 million. And they tried to sue us for fraud. And really what they wanted was they just wanted to get out. So we settled. And I spent the next 6 months shutting the company down. And the first month when we were separated from them was our best revenue month ever. But the fact of the matter is we had incurred all of these long-term contracts.
Of course.
And I had to get rid of them, and it killed the business. So when I started the second company in 2008, I really was determined to not do that because, I wanted to bootstrap for as long as I could. Now, that didn't mean that at certain points in the business, I considered we could grow a lot faster if we had more capital. So I did consider it along the way, but ultimately it wasn't the type of business that funders were interested in. It wouldn't scale massively, and there were people doing a lot of the work, and that was really not desirable.
And didn't that turn out to be just the best blessing ever as you brought this and grew this through to exit? So tell us about what the next company was and the process of what did you learn while you were growing it? I guess that's one thing that people always want to know is like when you're getting it to an asset that can be actually sellable, what was some of the lessons you learned along the way?
So many. So the company was called Boardroom Insiders. And in between when I had that first startup and when I started Boardroom Insiders, I got into tech marketing. When you're in the Bay Area, tech just sucks you in.
Yep.
And if you're competent, they're going to hold on to you. So I started doing marketing consulting and quickly saw that there was this need to speak to the C-suite because these tech deals were not only getting huge, as in 8 or 9 figures, they were also, tech was starting to impact every aspect of a company. So the C-suite players from, the chief information officer to the chief financial officer to, in some cases, even the CEO, they wanted more visibility and understanding of what these technologies and deals look like. And so that put the tech salespeople in the position of having to have a very different kind of conversation. The C-level, they don't want to talk about speeds and feeds or features and benefits. They want to talk about business impact. And so there was a need to really provide sales teams with intelligence on the individuals involved in approving the decision, as well as information about what kind of business initiatives is the CIO focused on, for example, and how can you tie your value proposition to that and just have that conversation.
So you prepped those salespeople to know everything about their prospect and how to talk, what mattered to them and how to talk to them.
Yeah, and it really involved a big mind shift for those folks. And so I set out to develop a dossier type template that I could populate with that information. And then at some point, I was working with a number of companies, big companies in Silicon Valley, and I realized they're all chasing the same 2,500 executives. So if I could put it all in a database and keep it updated, my vision was that I could just sit in my pajamas while people came online and bought these things and walked for it. It wasn't that simple. The marketers and sales teams needed a ton of hand-holding and training and coaching about how to use the information we were providing. And so there were a number of years when I was just consulting around that. And then I built a flat file database. So it was just a database of PDFs. My husband did that for me. And at some point I realized I need to build a proper database so that I can have a team of people just going in and updating this, and we're not having to re-upload files as they're revised. So that's how it started. And for quite a few years, I was just using it as a tool for my consulting business. And then at some point, I talked to an exited entrepreneur who was a personal friend, and he had done really, really well. And he's like, you've got to give this a try. And I said, well, I need to build a proper database and I don't have the funding to do that. And he's like, I'll write you a check. Just go and do it because this sounds really promising. And that was my okay, come to Jesus moment. It's like, yeah, okay, I've got to make this work because I just had this guy give me $125,000 and I'm not losing that money. There's no way I'm going to make it work. And so there are things that people are motivated by different things, right? And I was very motivated by that. I was motivated by the fear of losing it, but I also wanted this for myself. I wanted to build a business that wasn't tied to my hours because I'm kind of a workaholic and I work and work. And I thought, this would be healthy for me to find a way to separate my income from the number of hours that I work.
So you shifted essentially, is it right that you were able to shift from being a services business to being a product business with services that supported it?
Yes, exactly.
Wow. So, okay, one of the things I love that you said that I think resonates with both sides of your story, with the starting one with the 3 million, and then this is just the thought of letting that person who gave you the money, the exited founder, the thought of letting them down was like unfathomable to you. That this person, not just your own faith in yourself, but they had faith in you. And so you felt that sort of, I don't know if it was like pressure or increased drive to really go for it. I think that's an important insight. Sometimes when, especially for women, I think when we take in any kind of funding, even if it's like family, like, here, go do this, like, don't even worry about it, like, just go do this, you feel this immense responsibility that all of the weight lies on you to then turn that into something. And I think that's just something that I've experienced in my own life too, that I think was powerful, what you just said.
Yeah, it's all of the above. And then I took on a partner, and he had a wife and 3 children. And then we hired this employee and that employee.
Yep.
And it's what you realize, this enterprise, this tiny enterprise, is supporting all these people, even your vendors. We had a dedicated team of 25 people in India dedicated to us through a vendor, but that's how they made their living. We had a couple people on a dedicated team from our technology development company. I mean, at some point you've got dozens and dozens of people depending on you. And so you have to figure out a way to make it work. It's more than you and your success. It's all of these people and their children and all across the world. So,
yeah, I felt that too. I hear that. Yeah.
And at first it's like heavy. It's like, oh my gosh, this is scary. But then as you get on more solid ground, it becomes a point of pride and joy. And an unexpected experience that I never thought I would have. I never thought I would have so many people working for me. I had run small teams before, but I didn't have a ton of people management experience.
So from the time you started to the time that you sold, how long was that period?
14 years.
Okay. So at what point within the 14 years did you start thinking like, maybe I should sell this? Or how did that sale process first get started?
Well, the desire was from day one, especially when my partner joined. When you take on a partner, it's important to have that conversation. What's our end game here? And we both agreed we want to build this and sell it. Now, that doesn't mean that at many points throughout our journey, we thought, maybe this is just a lifestyle business. I mean, at some point, it did start to generate a lot of cash. It was very profitable after a number of years. And we thought, well, we'd love to sell it, but if we don't, we're finally at least paying ourselves well and funding our retirement, which we did do for a long time, and getting a lot of value out of it. But we saw a big opportunity in 2021, because what happened in 2020 is a lot of funding and deals didn't go anywhere because of COVID. And then in 2021, a lot of, private equity firms were starting to look down market at smaller companies.
Yes.
And, this was a confusing thing, because over the years we talked to PE firms and we talked to some mergers and acquisitions people, and the goalposts kept moving. At first it was like, well, when you get to 5 million ARR, that's the sweet spot. And then all of a sudden, right before COVID, it seemed to move to 10 million. And then after COVID, it was down to 5. I mean, it all depends on the changing market conditions. And so after not after, but during the COVID-y time, 21, we were being contacted weekly by multiple private equity firms, and started having some conversations with a few select firms. And how that works is, at some point, they want to see your financials and your customer information. And so you sign NDAs, and they take a look at these enormous spreadsheets and kind of do some numbers crunching about the quality of your revenue and your churn and all these important metrics. And then they'll say, well, we'd like to see where you are in another 6 months. So then they go away, and then they come back and they look at the same thing. So we were having a lot of these types of interactions. And at the same time, multiples were huge. The market was very, very frothy. So
Yes.
SaaS business, all of a sudden we were seeing multiples from like 7 to 12. And we knew we wouldn't be on that highest end because we are not sexy enough in terms of, we use people to do our work.
Right. You're not pure tech.
Yeah. So we thought, well, if we could get 7, that would be amazing, right? So we started to worry about timing because we knew, the majority of our customers were in tech, and tech had been going gangbusters for quite a few years. And, if you've lived as long as I have, that's not going to last forever.
Right. That's right.
So we started worrying, like, when's the crash coming? Because that's going to be really hard to manage through given our concentration in tech. And so 2021, I was back in South Carolina where my partner and the rest of our employees worked. And we got a call from one of these PE firms. And they said, well, how's it going? And I said, it's good, but, things are going really well. We just hired a VP of operations. We formed a leadership team, and we're just going to keep our heads down for the moment because we have an amazing pipeline and we want to see where it takes us. And he said, well, that's too bad because I could give you a term sheet for 48 million today. And I was like, what? So I hung up the phone and I looked at my partner and I said, I think we need to seriously
accelerate this plan. Yes.
And because we had just every time I was there, we would talk about our worries about timing. And so then I called the guy, Michael, who had given me that 125,000. And he had since gone on to found more companies and sell more companies. And now he's a public company CEO. And I told him, about the phone call. And he said, Sharon, they're full of shit. They are so full of shit. He's like, if you weren't thinking of selling before this phone call, I don't know why. He said, because they're gonna lure you in with this.
Exactly.
They're gonna chip away, and then you're gonna be down to 20 million, and you'll just take it because you're exhausted.
Yep.
So he said, why? What changed your mind besides the number? And I talked to him about my worries about timing and the economy, and he said, look, if you want to sell, you need to hire a banker and run a process. And so I hung up the phone and I ran into my partner's office and I said, what's he talking about? I don't know what this means. And my partner is a former commercial banker. So he's like, okay, it's like hiring a realtor. An M&A banker is like a realtor, but for your business.
That's right.
He broke it down for me in really simple terms without any judgment that I didn't know. And so he said, you have the most to gain and the most to lose out of this. So you need to run this. He said, I need to focus on sales and make sure our ARR is growing and solid. You should focus on this. So I said, great, that's what I'll do. And it was great timing because we were in the process we had formed a leadership team for the first time ever. And I was in the process of pushing a lot of my responsibilities down to these leaders. And so I actually had more time than I had ever had since I started running the business. And so I interviewed bankers, selected a banker, and it was off to the races. And it was about 4 months from hire to wire, as they say.
Yeah. And I actually think that some of that, it's timing that in that weird window within 2021, like the acquisition, the M&A market was nuts. And then it sort of slowed to a normal rate. Like for me too, it was also 4 months. I sold in 21, 4 months, start to finish. And I think now what I see is it's taking a little bit longer. But so when you ran the process, and I know I've heard you talk about how important it is to select the right partner to run that type of process, because these guys like have it down to a science and really understand what they need to do to make you marketable and fight the good fight and do all of that. Did you look at multiple companies to go to? Did you know instantly that this was the right company? How did that process work for you in terms of having offers from acquirers?
Well, we were looking at about 5 companies and all by referral.
Yeah.
I think that's so important.
Me too.
To have a network of other entrepreneurs who you can go to and say, look, this is what we're thinking of doing. Who would you recommend? And we also, I think, we were referred to a law firm that supports companies like ours through the process. And so we were referred to the law firm first. and we interviewed them, and they said that they would do, they recommended that we do like this full-scale document review of all of our business documents to make sure that we had everything in place.
Right.
You don't want to go into start your relationship with your banker and look like you're a disaster and you don't have your stuff together. So they agreed to do this document review first for free, with the understanding that if you do a transaction, you're going to use them as your law firm. And so we asked them for recommendations for bankers, because I thought, this is great. They know who's a disaster and who's good to work with, and they'll recommend some good people. So between personal recommendations and that, we maybe had like 5 that we were looking at. 2 declined to work with us because either they thought it wasn't a good fit from kind of the type and size of business, or they were too busy. Like you said, it was really crazy. And we were determined to start the process in 21 because we just knew something was coming.
You know timing. You are someone who I would say did accurately time the market. And it sounds like it was somewhat intentional. Like, I never say that anyone can time the market, but I do think that you knew that tech had a limited runway of this level of burgeoning craziness, and that the time would be now. And so that's really kudos to you on that. It's fascinating.
And not only that, but there were rumblings about Russia for a very long time.
Yes.
I remember having dinner with our tech firm, the owners of our tech agency.
Yeah.
And our team was in Russia.
Yes.
And I remember talking to them about it. Everything from like the SWIFT payment system, like they said, if that gets frozen, that's going to be an issue. And so we were talking about that earlier in 21. And so that was another concern. And look what happened. We sold in January of 2022, and by end of February, there's a war, and our team actually, I heard that our team members had to flee to Istanbul. So that's, that's something that could have been solved, but would have been very disruptive and worrisome.
For sure. So I think you really just tapped into your and your partner's intuition that this was just the time. And when you signed with the investment bankers and you go and you run this process, how did you end up ultimately selecting the acquirer? Did you choose based on money or fit or all of it? I know you talk a little bit about this on your TikTok.
Yeah, we would have always preferred a strategic deal. There are financial deals where it's usually PE firms buy 80% of you and then they give you more money to keep running it, or they bring someone in. Those I was very suspicious about, given my history with what happened when I sold more than 50% of my company.
Yep.
And they tend to be, there's more kind of value or more money is attached to future performance, which means you're not guaranteed to get that, or they stock, and messier and less clear about what your exit's going to look like. So we always favored a strategic deal, even though we knew the overall valuation is typically lower. And that's what we got. And I also was very mindful of finding a good home for our team. And at the time, I didn't know that I wouldn't be part of the team moving forward. You just don't know. But I was concerned about our team. And one of my criteria was, could we find a buyer that would actually expand opportunities for our team with a more global business, more brands under their umbrella, and also more opportunities to grow and be promoted within the company. We had limited opportunities, and there were some things we did and got really creative that provided opportunities for folks who were very ambitious, and we knew we would probably lose if we didn't provide those opportunities. Things like hybrid roles, for example. That's what I was thinking about when I was evaluating offers. And Euromoney, which now the company has been I can't even keep track of all of the different iterations they've done, but I think they're called Altrata now. And that's an umbrella brand for 5 acquisitions that they made in the people intelligence business. So that's what they call it. They acquired 2 companies that are, databases for nonprofits to use to, for potential donors. So rich people data. And then there are 3 companies that focused on executive decision maker data. And of course, there's some overlap in those 2 things. And so they just wrapped up this nice people intelligence business. A lot of our team members are still there 2 years later. I mean, actually, most of them who were there when we sold are still there. And I hear things are going really well. So,
well, you mentioned that you weren't sure if you were going to be there or not, or you didn't expect necessarily not to be there. Did you want to stay on? Were you open to staying on? How did that play out for you?
Yeah, so that's really interesting because at the time I wanted to stay. I was having a blast. I loved watching where the business was going. I loved the team. When I talked about, making sure I found a home where people could grow, and that I included myself in that. Like, this is great. If I'm part of the deal, there'll be more opportunities for me with this global company. But and I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know or realize that in the majority of these types of deals, the founders are usually out, and for very good reason. But it was very emotional for me, and rationally, I knew it was the right thing. But in my heart, I just still wanted to be there. And it took me a while to get over that. And, even seeing the different tools and everything they were rolling out in place of what we had, I thought, oh, this wouldn't end well for me.
Yes.
Like switching, for example, from Slack, which was a big culture builder for our team, switching from that to like Facebook for Business, which I didn't was still around. Like,
yes.
Be crazy, right? And
yes.
I would have been a big pain in the ass. So it's good that it worked out the way it did. And I realize that now.
And one of the things that you're very open about is the purchase price, and not just the purchase price, but what you actually took home. So I know you sold for it's 25 million, right? You ended up netting after everything and your partner and everything about 9. Did I make it up? I'm like, remember, okay, it was about 9, right?
After taxes, after all the deal, so you have to look at the deal fees.
Yep.
We had a phantom equity pool for our employees.
Yep.
We had Michael, and we had 2 very small investors who put in like 25,000 each when we needed to build out a data set. So, the deal fees, the shareholders, the employee pool, and then my taxes, I walked away with about 9 million.
So I just, again, want to share how grateful I am that you share this, because I've been doing this podcast now. I had a whole first season. It's very hard to get people to be open and talk about money. And you created a TikTok on this that went really viral. And I know from knowing you that must have been hard, like the night before you put that out, or like you're putting that out into the world. Talk to me about what went into that decision and if it's worked out well for you.
You are right. I had many sleepless nights over that video. I would wake up in a panic and then text my social media person like, oh, maybe we shouldn't put it on LinkedIn. Maybe we should only put it on TikTok. And I don't know what I was thinking, because once I put it on TikTok, people started posting it on every platform.
Right.
I wasn't even on Twitter at the time.
Right.
And it got more than 1 million views on Twitter. And a girlfriend of mine texted me and said, my daughter just saw you on Twitter. I didn't even know I was on there. And by the time I go in, I have 1 million views. So it was kind of crazy. But yes, I was very scared, but also excited. And what I've learned about myself is if I'm scared of something, it usually means it's going to turn out well. Because it's something that maybe no one's done before, or other people are scared to do. So that's why they don't do it. But, I have 2 sons, and my 25-year-old son, he's the older one, and he works in business. And it was really his idea. He's like, you need to put out a video because, we hear about how Gen Z is so into financial transparency. And I do believe it's not just Gen Z at this point, because I think we're in this period where so much is fake.
Yes.
So much is like some of these TikToks I watch.
I know.
Who have businesses.
I know.
I watch the whole thing and they talk about they're making $25,000 a month. I don't even know what they're doing.
Right.
Never once explain.
Right.
What is, and it sounds like something super shady and not real.
Right.
Or I saw this thing about these people were buying these flowers and then selling these flowers. Like, I don't.
Reselling them. Yeah. I think.
It's fake. It's fake. It's not.
Yeah.
So that, I think I've tapped into that zeitgeist of like people just want real truth. And I mean, the one thing that didn't scare me is I don't really have any, I'm not a fake person. I don't have skeleton in my closet that's fine to be like, oh,
she's full of it. She's, and your authenticity shines through. I think that's part of what makes it interesting. By the way, I think the bullshit has always existed. It used to be what I would call like the country club multiple, right? Guys on a golf course being like, I got 20x, like but they're full of shit. Like people always inflate their numbers. And now what exists in that space is instead of it being a country club multiple, it's sort of this bullshit it's an Instagram multiple of, oh, I made $25,000 in 2 days. Here's how. And like, it's really hard to discern truth from fiction out there. And I think the thing that makes you special is that you can immediately tell that it is authentic and it is real and you're there to truly help. And so that to me was very, very inspiring. I have a question for you that I haven't asked you before, and I don't think you've talked about. So I want to see if we can do it here. But do you think that the process of selling a business for a woman is different than it is for a man?
I don't think so. Occasionally might see these little microaggressions or things that you just notice and file away for later. But no, I mean, I don't think so. I am able to leverage men when I need to. And I don't actually say, hey, Lee, my partner, Lee, I want you to do this. I want you to say this, because I feel like it's not going to land as well coming from me. But I'll do it, and I won't tell him why I'm doing that. And that's the difference, I think, between, I'm the first year of Gen X, so I'm an old Gen X. And then my mother was also in the workplace. And so her generation and my generation, like, we were just clever and quiet about it, right? Like, if we know how this is going to work and this is unlikely to land well coming from me, you just say, hey, Lee, I want you to have this conversation. And a lot of younger women get pissed off about that. They're like, you should just put it, you should. And it's like, you know what? I'm trying to do something here. I'm trying to accomplish something. I don't need a fight. I don't need to educate anyone in this moment. I just want my money, right? And so I'm going to do what I need to do to get it. And if that means I have to apologize for something I said using a tone that people didn't like, which happened, or get someone else to have the conversation, that's what I'm going to do. And I was in chief for a while, so I was working with all these other women. And there was my first meeting, and I don't know where this woman went. I have to find her and see how it turned out. But she was in the process of going through the same thing I had just been through. She was coming up against men who were like, oh my gosh, you got this amazing offer. You're so lucky. It's so great that you're able to do this. And she knew from the comps in her industry that it was under offer. Mm-hmm. And so she had a male CFO, and she had him go back and negotiate. So it's the same kind of thing. If you get this feeling like they're just treating me like I'm lucky, not like I'm smart, put in your man and have them go to bat.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I hear from you, so I'm also Gen X, which I think is a major difference in generations in general, how we approach things very, very, very different with time and culture and all of this. I think the reality is that we've been building businesses as women like this, thinking about what's going to get the job done. And I don't care if I have to twist myself into a pretzel, and I don't care if I have to put a man in front of me. Like, I'll do what I need to do to get the job done and get it done. And how wonderful would it be if we didn't have to do it, but knowing how to do that and how to negotiate and get your stuff done is just essential. I mean, it really is. It's not, if you're going to be in the game, you have to know how to play the game. And I think it's like innately learning how to do that is important. And it's just, it's important not to deny that exists and that it will continue to exist for a while.
It's just the reality. And I mean, I'm the first one to speak loud and make a statement about things like that. But not in this case. It's like, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot.
Yep.
And if I want to go on and make my point loudly later, which I'm trying to now, and I have the freedom to, I needed to get through that whole process.
You are exactly right.
You know, you have to be practical about it. And it's the same thing, you know, I think about with my mother's generation. Like, I used to get really frustrated sometimes with my mother because my father would speak to her in a way that I found was just horrible and unacceptable.
Yeah.
He would say, "Why do you let him do this?" And now I'm going through this whole journey of reflection. I think it was kind of the same thing. Like,
she was playing the game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She did what she needed to do to get it done. And sometimes we need to not tolerate that. And sometimes, you know, there are certain situations, but in many situations, this is how I always felt about when people talked about likability, like, oh, we don't need to be likable. We don't need to smile. And I was like, oh, well, actually being likable and smiling, it helps you get the job done. But I think it will be ideal. The ideal future is when women like you and women like me are sitting on the other side of the table. That's when this all goes away. So we need to get, I think, as many women to grow, to exit when they're ready, if they want to, on their terms, and then really be able to be sitting on the other side of the table, whether it's advising or whether it's sitting at the PE table making the decisions. That's, I think, where we're going to see real change for us as a whole.
I think that's absolutely right. And that's part of what I'm trying to do with my content. I have a book coming out, is to level the playing field by sharing information. And there's a lot of gatekeeping that goes on in entrepreneurship, particularly in the kind of Ivy to Silicon Valley pipeline.
Yes.
A lot of jargon. And I feel like it intimidates people and keeps them, it makes them quit before they even start. And so I'm trying to demystify a lot of that. But I'm still learning too. I mean, one of the things that happened when that video went viral is it got shared by venture capitalists and well-funded elite entrepreneurs.
Ones who probably never would have funded you.
In fact, a venture capitalist shared it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And was very complimentary. And I commented on it because, you know, can't hide my snark sometimes.
Of course.
I said, "Thank you so much for giving this so much visibility. And honestly, this is the first time I've ever gotten any attention from a VC."
That's amazing. Amazing. I'm glad.
When the press release was being drafted for my deal, my partner called me and he said, "We don't want our names on this," because our names weren't on it. And I'm like, I'd like some recognition here.
Of course you would.
And he's like, "Sharon, we don't want our names on this." He's like, "Everybody's going to come out of the woodwork," and he's
asking for money.
Everybody's going to think you put every dime of that 25 million in your pocket because people don't understand how these deals work.
Yes.
And he said, "You don't want that." And I thought about it. And I was like, I guess he's right. And anyway, the buyer wasn't going to put our names in there. What I realized is that I think some people want everyone to think they got less so that, you know, people have to know the woodwork, but people want everyone to think they got more. And what I learned when the video went viral is people started commenting about and telling stories about founders who had run companies that had raised 50 million or 100 million, and they walked away with less than I did.
Way less. Way less, Sharon. Those dudes who raise all that money and they come out, it's like you make a fraction. It's really shocking. I mean, people don't realize. They don't.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So tell me about the books. So I know you have a book out, which will be, but when this comes out, it'll be out. So you have a book out now, and then you have another book as well. Talk to me about both of those.
So the first book, which is out as we're speaking, is called Scaling with Soul, How I Built and Sold a $25 million tech company without being an asshole. The S's are asterisks. So, I know that it's a little bit controversial to have a swear word in your title. Okay. But it was important to me because the highest profile tech entrepreneurs are really ruining the reputation of all of us everywhere. And living in San Francisco, I mean, people don't like the tech bros, and and for good reason. There are very high profile people who I don't need to name who are just acting like jerks. The book is an entrepreneurial memoir. It's more of a beach read than a business guide, but there are lessons throughout. And it's really an exercise in reflection on how I got to where I did, because I didn't even realize how rare I did was until about a year after I did it. I started reading about entrepreneurial exits, and not just for women, but in general, and realized how well we did. I mean, we got an all cash deal. And part of this was reading the comments on Twitter. I mean, the assumptions that were made. No way she got all cash. It's like, yeah, 100% cash.
Actually, I did. Yeah.
No way she lives in California. How did she keep her tax at 30%? No way she lives in California. Ooh, not only do I live in California, I live in San Francisco. Things like, why didn't I take advantage of this certain tax break?
Yep.
And those assumptions were really based on the idea that I must have been rich when I started the company already.
Right.
No, I wasn't.
Right.
Estimating my own finances. So
I got that too. Why wasn't this in a trust? Why wasn't this? I'm like, well, it wasn't large. I'm not large enough on the wealth tax spectrum for it to matter. Like some of it was, yes, I totally.
And put it into a special opportunity.
Yes.
I need to let me live, y'all.
Yep. And people don't realize, and they need that type of truth. And I'm so happy that you're on that journey of truth telling, and that I am so excited to be able to showcase that in any way. It's really awesome, Sharon. So that's the first book is the memoir. The second book is more instructional, right? That's coming out. That's going to be like a how-to.
Yeah, it's a bootstrapper's guide, and it's divided into 3 sections: build, scale, and sell. And it really contrasts how bootstrappers have to do things differently from people who have funding. But I think it's also instructional for those who have funding, because just because you have funding doesn't mean you should just
waste it.
Blow it. You don't need to hire a CFO on day one for your startup. You can really run for a number of years until you pull the trigger on certain hires and investments.
Absolutely.
And that's good business, I think.
Absolutely. So, Sharon, you're a content machine. Love reading, looking at everything that you do. Where should people follow you? Where's the best place? Or is it all under your name? Do you want to share how people can check you out and follow all of your content if they're not already? Chances are if they're on this podcast, they follow you already. But let's see.
Well, I have a website, Sharon K, middle initial K, Gillenwater.com. And all of my links are there, but you can follow me with that same handle on TikTok, on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, and I post everything across those platforms. TikTok tends to be a little bit more interesting. I get a little bit more personal there with stuff that sometimes I'm afraid to post on LinkedIn.
I totally feel you and understand. I understand that completely. As somebody who's reinventing themselves on their content journey, I completely understand. The other day I said, oh, maybe I'll just do this on TikTok and not put this out on Instagram. And then I was, because my mom friends are on Instagram or but I ultimately am deciding to take a cue from you and just really just put myself out there as much as I can and share my story. And and hopefully join the ranks of women like you who are sharing their stories of exit. It's awesome. Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me, Carrie.
Thank you. It was a great talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.